I'm joined today by several subject matter experts on the subject of SWP, and I would welcome them to introduce themselves. And Sue Brooks, I'll start with you.
Hello everybody, my name is Sue Brooks. I'm the founder of the Imagine collaborative community. I guess now more than ever, organisations need to be able to constantly adapt, to respond at pace to what is a very much a changing business context, a business environment. And Strategic Workforce Planning 2.0 is an attempt to build a new approach, really, to enable leaders to be able to build dynamic, future-ready capability, and to do so within an ethical framework.
Thanks, Sue. Nick?
Yes, I'm Nick Kemsley. I run my own consulting business, and I've been involved in SWP for many years now. Really, from my standpoint, it's about working with organisations to try to move forward in areas like this, particularly around organisational capability. And I've been associated with the Imagine Collaborative for probably a couple of years now, since very early doors.
Thanks, Nick. Viv?
Hi, I'm Vivi Meredith. I'm a head of HR at Anglo American, very recent role change, but I've been lucky enough to be involved with the Imagine Collaborative since its inception, and predominantly the work that I've done around strategic workforce planning was during my time working with GSK.
Thanks, Viv. Martin?
Hi, it's Martin Thomas. I'm the head of Total Workforce Strategy for Philips. And SWP is important for me because Philips is going through a major transformation from being a distributed conglomerate, looking at a number of different areas, to focus on becoming a healthcare technology company. And being a health technology means we have focus on different skill and capability. So when I think about that workforce strategy, I want to know what those skills and capabilities are that we're going to need in the future that can underpin that transformation.
Brilliant. Thanks, Martin. And Ben?
Hi everyone, I'm Ben MurphyRyan. So I lead the global talent acquisition function for ARM. ARM is a UK headquartered technology company, semiconductor and software design. And SWP has really been a kind of topic of conversation for us for particularly the last couple of years, and I've been involved with the Imagine work for that period of time. Really, kind of for me, the reason why we're interested is looking at how, as we grow as an organisation, we can be more kind of considered and thoughtful around the workforce planning considerations we need to build into our organisations. So I've been delighted to be part of the journey with Imagine so far.
Great. Thank you so much to all of you for helping setting the scene as to why we're talking today. And to really dig into this a bit further, Sue, could you share for anyone listening around what is the Imagine Collaborative and how did it come about?
Yes, of course. Well, the Imagining Collaborative community is an experiment to test the value of open collaboration. And it involves cohorts of leaders from what are now 38 leading international organisations, supported by an ecosystem of expert partners, thought leaders, and academic bodies. It was initiated back in 2017 by a group of anchor members, really to help their leaders and organisations leap forward and future fit for a digital age. Our collective focus is on cultural transformation and looking, I suppose, at our collective goals. We are looking to build the blueprints, the leader guides, and create a platform for change. The working groups are our vehicle for innovation and for experimentation, and Strategic Workforce Planning 2.0 is just one of 5 working groups that launched at the end of last year.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sue. And Nick, a lot of your career has been spent on SWP, and why focus on SWP?
I guess in my corporate career, which involved running talent and organisational development functions, typically at regional or global level, I could see the need for it emerging then. I think now with the benefit of probably 13, 14 years being heavily involved in it, I guess I see it almost as a missing link now in both business performance and in HR credibility. Really that special ingredient that begins to connect everything together. And if we can just get a little bit better at it, I think we'll see a step change in both.
That's good for everyone to realize that it can drive change as well. And I think to give some further context from Viv and Martin and Ben's perspective, starting with you, Viv, what problems were you trying to solve within your organisation, and what was potentially missing from existing SWP approaches and methodologies that were being used?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. I suppose I describe it across a little bit of a journey for me. I'd had quite a lot of my HR career in generalist roles, so HR business partnering roles, and I could see more and more the need for a real heavy connection of the people and organisation agenda to strategy. But often we were seeing that being connected in the relatively short term, rather than sort of thinking about the art of the possible, the future focus, and working backwards. And so as a practitioner, I could sort of feel this gap. And then I had the opportunity, actually, first of all, at AstraZeneca, to take on an accountability to go deep into strategic workforce planning alongside a talent agenda, and really build up some sort of thought leadership and start to dig into this space as part of my role, as well as a sort of interest area. And it started to sort of open up this real opportunity with business leaders to start thinking, for those who were already thinking on a future focused agenda, to join the people and organization element to that. But for those that were needing to sort of open up that lens and maybe come out of the short-term thinking, it was a way of sort of creating a place where we could change mindset, think about the art of the possible, and, you know, really think towards those longer term pieces. And then I was lucky enough to move to GSK and had the opportunity again to sort of iterate and sort of help build, you know, the way we would adopt strategic workforce planning at GSK. And my big sort of learning in it all, I guess, one, selfishly, it was about how can HR partner with the business at a much more strategic level. And that isn't always happening, even though we're calling partnering roles strategic business partners often in the title. It isn't always happening. So selfishly, I thought it was great from a community perspective, but I could see a gap. I guess to Nick's point, I could see a gap in where we could do something differently than we were doing in the past.
And from your experience, Viv, did you feel that the approach to SWP was not meeting the business objectives?
I felt as if there'd been some history. So if I use the GSK example, there'd been some history with some really neat tools and activities, and some real sort of significant investment and effort have gone into the work. But what my analysis was sort of telling me was that it was still creating in the business a bit of a shoulders down experience, a bit of a, oh, you know, spreadsheets, oh, it's so complicated, or, oh, trust the processes and it will get you somewhere. And I guess my hope and the sort of intent around driving a different approach in GSK was to really get that shoulder up feeling, wow, we can really solve something here. We can really get into this strategic agenda. We can really make a difference, and maybe do some sort of quantum leap on some absolutely strategic capabilities rather than getting lost in the weeds on the ones and twos. And so I think that was the big shift. And when I was sort of looking around the marketplace, talking with consultants, thinking about this and how to build this, I was coming across gaps of things that didn't appear to have been thought of yet. And I guess that's where, you know, the beauty of starting to get involved in this work came for me.
Right, having all of these great people from different organisations coming to have this, you know, same conversation, and potentially similar problems, if not maybe their own unique ones. Martin, from a Philips perspective, what problems were you trying to solve where you felt SWP needed to be looked at more intently or could be elevated?
I think as well as the change in our organisations through that transformation to a healthcare technology company, we're also all aware of the changes that are going on in the workforce and how that workforce of the future is going to be different. Our SWP approach focused on our strategic positions, maybe the top 2,000 out of 80,000 roles, solely on employees. And there was no consideration around what the workforce of the future might look like, where we might get work done in a different way. How do we think about different ways of getting that work done? Maybe not through an employee, but if we are on employees, how do we build that future? How do we align our campus or graduate recruitment behind that SWP to build the future leader pipeline and future skill and capabilities that we needed? So I wanted to bring it out beyond just the strategic positions that had been identified and start to embrace some of the wider workforce, be that graduates, campus, or the external workforce.
Okay, and Ben, from your perspective from working at ARM, again, same question, what problems were you seeing that you wanted to solve and felt that SWP could help you address?
Yeah, so I think from our perspective, we've been in a kind of high growth phase for the past few years, and one of the things that kept coming up was just really around the kind of constant pivot of our direction of some of our strategic initiatives, and actually I guess a gap, using Viv's terminology, right, around actually that there was something not happening in our planning process and planning cycle that was really missing some really important people considerations, which meant that we were constantly trying to kind of chase and kind of go back and do things again, versus actually saying we don't, and we still don't, to be fair, if we're on the journey, have a kind of mid to long-term view of what are the things that we're trying to aim for in terms of our people plan. And so really for me, it's around thinking around the gap between connecting people considerations into business planning. We all do business planning, a lot of talk about it, but actually we're not really said, well, what does that mean from a people and workforce perspective? And I think, again, talking Martin's perspective there around the fact that the kind of different generations in the workplace and expectations are changing and shifting, and we hadn't even really taken account of that in the way that we were hiring and also just growing our business from a headcount perspective. So it was really in that kind of solving this problem. I think also SWP, and we talked about this previously in some of our sessions, has a bad reputation, right? It's a mystical dark art. It's very, very difficult to do. And I think actually one of the things I was really keen to do was see if we could actually do something. And actually that's where, I think we're going to talk this in a second, the kind of power of the collaboration comes in, to say actually everybody's going through the same challenges, and we've all got different contexts and different businesses and size and scale and geographies. But actually when you come down to it, we all face very similar challenges from an SWP perspective. So for me, that was the really interesting piece around, is there some way that we could just share ideas and take things forward? And I guess that's ultimately one of the reasons why we were involved in the Imagine work from fairly early on, is because of that power of the collaborations and that we believe in as a business, and I could definitely see the value from an SWP point of view. So quite excited to see what we could do.
Brilliant, thanks Ben. And then jumping back to you, Sue, once as part of this work stream you had collected and identified some of these challenges and problems that people were facing with SWP, how did you approach trying to solve those problems?
Yeah, I think, I mean, as the group have been discussing, first of all, just generally around the approach to the workforce groups, you know, I think what we were looking to do is to basically use open collaboration between businesses, but also involve research and academic bodies, with a very clear intent to deliver something that was robust and commercial in terms of an outcome, something that we could also publish and share with people beyond just the members of the community, that might even challenge academic thinking and take it forward as well. But the approach across all of the working groups has really been a kind of three-step journey of sharing, of co-creation and experimentation. So the first step was to get the co-leaders together, so Martin and Viv, with the support from Nick, bringing them together to be very clear on what's the problem we are trying to solve, which, you know, you were beautifully drawing out of Viv and Martin and Ben there, in terms of getting behind what is it that if we developed a new approach to strategic workforce planning, what are the problems we are actually trying to solve? And then what's our big idea as co-leaders? What's the vision for strategic workforce planning 2.0 and the value it would deliver? in terms of that vision, and where we believe our focus for change, our focus areas for change would be. So that was our first step as co-leaders, to actually do that upfront thinking, and then bring member organisations together to actually do a bit of a stock take on current practice, that sharing piece. Okay, what's currently happening at the moment? Where could we see where we've got examples of current best practice? And that was collated into what we called an SWP 1.0 guidebook. But then where are the gaps? Where do we need to put our breakthrough thinking and innovation on, where we've clearly got gaps in current practice? So that was step 3. And members organised themselves into subgroups or clusters, as we called them, in order to focus in on breakthrough thinking and experimentation into the gaps.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sue. And Nick, as someone who's been involved with this work stream from the beginning, what's the outcomes and how can they help other organisations? So if someone was listening to this conversation, what's your view of how this group can help other organisations?
I think probably the start point of that is part of how the focus on SWP has changed over time in a very exciting direction. You know, when I first encountered it, really it was by HR for HR, more like resource forecasting plus, and seen that develop into a talent discussion, as has been mentioned. Particularly, I think, you know, fortune favours are prepared in that respect. But the really exciting discussion that's been happening, I think, in recent times is the business discussion, where leaders, I think, now recognise that SWP is about managing risks in strategic execution, about helping to optimise costs, about helping to optimise capability. And so in terms of the outputs, I think typically organisations have struggled a bit. They've struggled a bit to try and drive some of the actual outputs, even though they've understood the need intellectually. I think the outputs of the work we're doing now are particularly helpful because, first of all, they shed a little bit of light onto why organisations may have struggled, in the words of those who've had a go. I think, as has been mentioned, the brand of SWP has, I think, suffered a little bit by some of those failed attempts over the years. But more constructively than that, it also offers some sort of very practical and, what's most important, proven ideas of what can work. Not just in a not very accessible way, but in an extremely accessible way. I think a lot of organisations have been caught between two chairs over the years of either having a go at it themselves, but perhaps not really understanding exactly what they're trying to do, or having discussions with perhaps much larger organisations or suppliers of software or goods aimed at helping them, which feels quite industrial. And so there's been this sense of neither one thing nor another. I think what the outputs of this work have really done is to make some of this very accessible to organisations who don't want to commit enormous amounts of time and money to finding out whether or not they have a problem, but just want to try some things that other people have found have worked.
Thanks, Nick. And taking the outputs of the guidebook that's been produced that talks about best practice, and also some of the experiments that have been run by organisations. Martin, if I go over to you, how has this work to date helped you build credibility for SWP within your organisation?
I think it's been great to be able to see some of the case studies from others, and the fact that everybody was willing to be open and share, which was part of the approach we wanted in this collaboration, and case studies from a whole variety of industries, you know, every sector, every function, commercial, government, public sector. Those have really helped reinforce some of our thinking, reinforce some of our approach to how we're going to review SWP, and it's also given a little bit of backing to what we're doing, to say actually there's some thought and some insights and research that has gone into some of this. So as we start to explore some of these themes ourselves, we've got a little bit of backup to that. And then finally, about what's going to come in SWP 2.0. So what's going to come as a result of the experiments that are currently running, where we're getting more and more insight from more and more companies into how new ways of working could work and what could go into that SWP 2.0 playbook.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Martin. And Ben, from your perspective, you know, same question. Have you been able to sort of increase or impact the credibility of SWP at ARM?
Yeah, so it's kind of on my agenda, which is good. So actually it's helped me with my actual day job work, because it's something that as we've talked more about over the past year or so and started to explore and engage on some of the topics around this within the organization, it's helped us to approach problems differently and to start to build some of that kind of learning but kind of mindset in as well. We are doing some dedicated project work on SWP as well. So in the background, it's allowed us to use ARM as an experiment in some ways, particularly going and talking more credibly with the executive team around kind of the role of workforce planning and how we can bring more of that people planning into the business cycle. We're actually live now going through some experiments and doing some work actually with Nick on this and his kind of consulting role to look at how we can adapt some of this and try to bring some of that thinking into our next budget cycle, which is starting up in later this year. So it's really exciting to be able to actually take some of the things we talk about, experiment, share back the experience as well, and that's part of the collaboration, right? Is sharing, well, this is what we found, and people can often help coach and guide you go through it as well when you're doing something new. But also, there's definitely value for the organisation, and whilst we're never going to kind of, it's like the fourth bridge, you never quite get to the end of it with SWP. You always start again as a new cycle. Actually, it's definitely helping us along the way. So we've been able to, I guess, raise the profile of this. And actually, we're having conversations now with our finance business partners, with our operations planning teams, for example, in a way that we weren't previously. So there's a definite value that we're seeing from this, and that will continue as we go forwards.
Which is great. A continuous improvement approach is really helpful, and something that we get to all see as part of this work stream, as well as all the other work streams that Sue has operating. And Viv, from your perspective, how have you seen the credibility of SWP be impacted by the work that's been done to date?
Thanks, Julie. I suppose there's a few things that, and you know, I guess building on the points that my colleagues have made, that there were sort of three things that I was keen to focus on. One of those was strategic capabilities. So it's getting some language into the organisation, which was about the most important capabilities to focus on, so that we could to some extent take noise away and really cut to where can we make the most difference. The second one was how does work get done? So, you know, really stimulated by some of the thinking that Martin had done at Philips around this sort of total workforce, and also, you know, automation, augmentation. How can we think about how does work get done, rather than, to Nick's point, you know, traditionally having seen it as an extension of kind of resourcing up to talent, you know, where next? Well, the where next is very much about this sort of how does work get done in a very, you know, distributed model. And then I guess the third thing was bringing HR's external lens to the table, as well as other support functions' external lens to the table. You know, often the work had been done in a way where it was very much about what do we know about our internal workforce, what do we know about what's within our thinking, rather than saying, okay, well, what's going on in the marketplace? We may have a desire to do this, but actually, what EVP will we need? You know, what do we need to do? And so I wanted to make sure that we, you know, I learned from other experiences, and I think what the work has been able to do has allowed us to sort of say, okay, use this to stimulate thinking. There are no silver bullets here. This may work, it may not. Let's try it, let's experiment, let's bring some stuff back. But actually, we're not trying to give you a process here, we're giving you stimulation. And we're also trying to build confidence. So actually, by being comfortable with experimenting, it actually brings out confidence to say, hey, if I don't give it a try, then I'm not going to experiment, and I don't have to get it right first time. And I guess also I saw it as a way of bringing credibility to the thought leadership we were putting into this work, because with the body of companies behind us, the thinking that had gone into it, it brings confidence in the thought leadership that is coming into the organisation. So they would be my key things, Julie.
Okay. And Sue, if we think about this collaboration to date and bringing together the focus, the thought leadership, the collaboration, knowledge share, being willing to try with the experiments as part of this journey, which isn't complete yet, what's next for this group and for SWP, and what are your expected outcomes?
Yeah, I guess, you know, from the start, all of the working groups have been clear that they're trying to produce something that's eminently practical and usable. You know, it isn't a theoretical exercise or just a chance to take away a few good ideas. It is a committed piece of work to actually build a practical guide in strategic workforce planning's terms that's an end-to-end guide, from strategy to process to methodology to toolkit. You know, we're trying to build this practical, usable guide to strategic workforce planning, and something that could be applicable, as Viv and Martin have referenced, to all elements of the workforce of the future. So where the group has got to now, and where it's focusing on this year, is having worked on its cluster groups, it's now fined down into areas where it really wants to tackle some of those practical issues that have come up as it's attempted to experiment or apply some of the thinking that's come out of the group. So, for example, one of the subgroups this year will focus on the new operating model for strategic workforce planning that the group has designed and looked to put into practice. But now what they're focusing on is actually what does it take to actually get working and to sustain across functional approach to strategic workforce planning. So we're homing in on the practical issues that we've experienced as we've approached some of our thinking. One of the other work streams is now looking at the application of strategic workforce planning to areas such as, for example, the employee value proposition. You know, how does a more strategic approach add value to the attraction and retention, etc., of different employee segments or employee groups. And one of the third areas is looking now at the practical implementation of SWP 2.0 and getting away from making it as ever an industry and putting it into practice. How do we get traction around this new approach without making it an industry? So these are some of the things that the group is actually working on this year, in actually to move things forward and to continue to get value from the collaboration.
Brilliant. So that's the how. How do we make it happen? Which is always important, and makes it real for anyone wanting to actually do it. And Nick, from your perspective, if you're C-suite, HR leadership, talent COE, hiring manager, functional leader, what's in it for them?
I think this is where one of the real step changes has happened, and I just build on what Ben said about I think the shift in thinking of SWP as a separate HR-run process to actually this is just part of how good businesses plan, and it's the part that's missing. And so when you start approaching it differently, the real exciting element for me at the senior level has been just watching the traction, watching the engagement, when before it wasn't there so much. So for example, when I talk with CEOs, they will often talk about and worry about the capability of their organization to deliver on the promises that have been made strategically. You know, they have a whole host of investors, shareholders, regulators, and that promise is really important. And beginning to build in those kind of SWP conversations as a massive element of strategic execution capability and a massive element of organizational cost gives them a sense of confidence around the organization's ability to deal, or where there are gaps, gives them confidence they've been surfaced at the right time, they can be managed alongside any other risk. So I think that's a key piece I've seen at C-suite. And then I think at the sort of business functional level, It's that joining together and alignment and integration of different functions around business planning, where perhaps previously these have been quite siloed approaches. On one hand, you had finance working on the financial envelope. You might have procurement working on procurement strategies. You might have HR working on a people plan, and you've got sales and marketing working on a demand plan or whatever. Being able to pull that all together and look at the demand side, the fulfillment side, and the enablement side, and to be able to see how finance is reacting very positive, saying, oh, this is great, we get much better forecasts now. Being able to look at that joined up, integrated approach has been really key. I think if you're in an HR or talent world, what this provides you is you're moving the conversation up a level, you know, and that means if you do it right, you have the ability to move from that receiver of strategy role, which many functions sometimes find themselves in, and that reactive cycle, to be much more of a sort of proactive co-creator, because you're dealing at that business strategy level with some really important stuff. And also, I think the ability to focus your efforts. Sue mentioned employer value proposition as a way of sort of targeting your resources on specific things of real business value. Being able to make choices about how you focus time, resources, and money on the things that make the most difference to business is a massive prize. As a line manager or someone leading people, I guess if we do it right, what you'll notice is simply that you have access to the right skills you need at the right time, and that you're able to deliver what's asked of you, because if we all deliver what's asked of us, I guess that de facto the business strategy gets delivered.
Which is at the heart of it, trying to meet those business objectives with the right skills. Thank you so much, Nick. Ben, just going to you and thinking about the journey so far and the journey ahead in terms of SWP, what are you most excited about?
So I guess kind of twofold really. The first is excited about the collaboration continuing, right? And actually the value that I think I've really got from it has been around working with everyone on the call and working across the group, and just hearing the examples that come from the application of SWP in different organizations. So that's really powerful, and I still find that really valuable in the conversations we're having, particularly at the moment as we've looked at SWP 2.0, and one of the aims of that is to share the learnings we're all going through around actually this point of time right now, around with COVID-19 really driving a lot of change in organizations and bringing a lot of workforce planning considerations to the forefront. Actually, I'm really valuing the opportunity to hear what other organizations are doing and thinking, and that peer-to-peer connection is something that I'd love to continue. So quite excited about that. Actually, as a workstream lead on part of the activity on the operating model for SWP, really interested to see both how we can take that forward in my organization, but actually look at how we can help others to think around kind of delivering SWP in different contexts. And actually, that for me is quite exciting to see the next evolution of the operating model and how we take it forward. So kind of personally interested, but definitely from the collaboration is the piece that I think I really value from this experience too.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that, Ben. Viv, from your perspective, what are you most excited about?
I hope this doesn't sound sort of too lofty, but I'm really excited about the sort of social and economic purpose piece. We know that the world of work is changing significantly. We know automation, augmentation is going to really change what people are doing. And I'm really excited to work with the group on, so what does that mean, you know, in terms of dignity, in terms of employability, in terms of sort of that social purpose of positively making the transitions that strategic workforce planning kind of allows us to embrace, get hold of, and positively make transformation, rather than, you know, reactively handling restructurings, skill gaps, etc. So, you know, that's the bit I'm really excited about, amongst many other things, Julie.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Viv. And Martin, from your perspective, what are you most excited about with SWP moving forward?
I think there's two things. One is some of the output of the work streams around how do we get those mixed teams that Nick talked about engaged, how get them to understand what's in it for them to collaborate in the way that we've collaborated across this whole approach. and see how we all have to work together to get a much better outcome of that. And then the other one is around creating a new way forward. And I'm going to quote, but I really like what we're doing around the SWP implementation work stream, which is looking to develop something that is agile, lightweight, practical, targeted, and suitably messy. Because if we overplan, it'll never happen. And I really like that phrase that work stream's come up with. So thank you to Nick and the team for that one.
Good agile principles built in there. And Nick, from your perspective, thanks Martin. Nick, from your perspective, what are you most excited about with regards to SWP?
I think from my side, it's it feels like there's a final realization that we've been trying over and over and over again to cook a meal, and it hasn't tasted good, and we finally realized we just can't make the meal we want to make from the ingredients we had, and we need to go and get some new ingredients. So it feels like we're mucking around less with the top layer, and we're sort of looking at some of the fundamentals and bringing in place some new principles here, and that feels tremendously energizing, actually, because it really feels like you're not just lighting a new way forward. You're also have the capability to undo some of history and perhaps paint a new picture.
Thanks so much, Nick. And I think one of the great things about this group is the sharing and the collaboration and making information available to people in a variety of different forums, from this conversation right through to the guidebook and playbooks that have been made available on LinkedIn and other forums. And Sue, to finish up with yourself as someone who's spearheading the new world of SWP, from your perspective, what are you most excited about?
Well, I guess, my motivation in creating and founding the Imagine Collaborative Community has been to evidence the power of collaboration. I mean, in the pandemic, have we not seen how powerful collaboration has been to move things forward, to innovate, to change things? One of the primary premises of the collaborative community was to say, if we brought a diverse group of people together who had a shared challenge and a common goal, the value, hopefully, absolutely would be in sharing. So, and you're hearing it from Ben and Viv and Martin and so on, that there's clearly been value in sharing. But beyond that, the aspiration of Imagine and the community is that if we bring those things together, we have the opportunity for genuine breakthrough thinking and experimentation and change, things actually changing and moving forward. And I think for me, the most exciting side is this is our year of experimentation. This is our platform year where we put our ideas into practice and we evidence the success. And so I'm very excited to see things, not only for us to get value in the sharing, but to really feel that we've actually innovated and we've experimented and we've moved things forward as a group.